You are good to go.
Great, thank you. Okay, Council, I'd like to call this regular council meeting of August 24th, 2021 to order. I'm going to ask for adoption of the agenda. I have an amendment here so that the agenda be adopted as amended to include an in-camera item pursuant to 90.1K of the community charter. Moved by Councillor Palmer, seconded by Councillor Brook. All in favor? Motion's carried. Adoption of the minutes from the regular council meeting of August 10th, 2021. Someone want to move that for me, please? Councillor Charlotte, seconded by Councillor Palmer. All in favor? Motion's carried. Any business arising from those council minutes? Seeing none, I am going to move on to third reading, adoption of bylaws, item 5A, intercommunity business license amendment, bylaw 2296. If someone want to put that motion on the table, please. Councillor Charlotte, go ahead.
That the intercommunity business license amendment bylaw number 2296 be adopted.
Seconded by Councillor Palmer. Any discussion on that matter? Being none, there's just some inclusions in the bylaw that's already in place. Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, just a comment. Thanks to staff. It's good to see this. It is a fairly significant piece of work that's done with that bylaw, and it's going to be helping things in the future for the building sector. So,
absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Announcements from the mayor. Some good news story. Our Public Works Operations Manager, Darren Komanowski, is retiring. He has spent 28 years with the city of Revelstoke. The good news is Darren's been a great asset to our community. The sad news is that he's leaving. Darren, I just want to say thank you for all that you've done for the community and for all of your staff. Much appreciated for your service to the community, and we wish you all the best in your retirement going forward. So thank you again, Darren, for all the work that you've done on behalf of council and of all the staff. Thank you. I just want to talk a little bit. We've seen some changes with restrictions, COVID-19, so everybody's back mandated to wear masks. That's the same throughout the community inside. So we have that at City Hall as well. Again, we just encourage everyone who hasn't had a chance to get vaccinated, get vaccinated. You will help keep the COVID-19 away from our community. On a positive note, I want to thank the community who's gone out of their way to get vaccinated. Heard yesterday from Interior Health, we are 87% vaccinated here in our community. That's with a single dose. Double dose is 80+%, and we are just shy of 800 people who have not been vaccinated here in our community. So that's a great number that have been vaccinated, and I just want to thank the community for their commitment to keeping us safe. Definitely some concerns moving forward with the COVID numbers overall in the province. Revelstoke's still doing relatively good, and I want to thank the community for their work in making sure that that is happening. Okay, we're going to move on now to item 9A, bylaws. Does somebody want to put that motion on the table for me? Councillor Charlotte.
Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 2298 be read the first time.
Someone want to second that for me? Councillor Brooks Hill. Any discussion on that motion? This is dealing with the Thomas Brook lands. So do we have anyone from Ms. Wade, do you want to speak to this OCP amendment bylaw?
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a short presentation if council wishes to have the presentation.
Yes, please.
Okay, bear with me as I share my screen. Having technical difficulties.
Just pausing for station identification.
Right. It's not letting me share. My apologies. No.
You got your microphone up this way in case you need
Yep.
to speak.
There we go. Can you see that now?
Yes, we can now. Thank you.
Perfect. Sorry about that. There we go. Back in order. Here we go. So council, today we have OCP Amendment Bylaw 2298, which is the Thomas Brook Resort Fringe land use. I'll just quickly run through our recommendations and background discussion and next steps. Staff are recommending that the official community plan bylaw amendment number 2298 be read for a first time. I'll just quickly run through that. At the August 10th council meeting, staff presented our OCP bylaw amendment number 2297. Council passed a resolution for us to decouple the Thomas Brook land designation of Resort Fringe and to bring it back as a separate amendment. Staff has prepared that and it's before you today. I wanted to quickly overview, we did hear at the council table discussion about engagement with the residents. So I thought I'd quickly run through what has happened with staff and the residents, highlighting quickly that there's 23 properties, of which there's 22 separate owners, because one owner owns 2 properties. And we extended the meeting invites through a community representative who's been very helpful in communicating with the residents. We met on August the 4th with 11 of the 22 property owners who were supportive. One household could not attend, but staff did meet with this household prior to the meeting to discuss their concerns. Then on August the 18th, we met again with the residents, and 7 of the 22 property owners could attend from Zoom. And they were in supportive. And there was one household who was not and had some questions. So we had 7 that were supportive and 1 that was opposed. And the reason why it was 7 is we had somebody write in as well to us because they couldn't attend. And then we met with the person who was opposed on the 19th of August and spent a significant amount of time going through the questions they had and discussions on the amendment, and also talking about the short-term rental policies because there was some overlap with that. So just to highlight the Thomas Brook, it was annexed into the city. It contains the CSRD's OCP land designation and zoning. It is being in this zone for several years now. And part of us moving forward is to do a land use designation that would apply initially to the Thomas Brook area, and would look at amending this to a resort fringe area to allow some flexibility for the residents in the community after what we've heard from the residents. And the amendment would also apply to the tourist commercial development permit area to these properties. So there are 5 policies in the resort fringe land use. High level, the idea is that it would be promoted to allow up to medium density in accordance with the definition we're proposing in the OCP Amendment Bylaw 2297 under sections 13.3.3, which is the low, medium, and high residential that we went through at the last council meeting. We would also look at the conservation design approach, which is seeking to minimize the land disturbance and maximize natural assets to address some of the environmental concerns and sensitive environmental features. The lands would be attached to or connected to municipal servicing. As you're aware, there's already servicing in that area that was part of the reason for the annexation. Then the other issue would be that we would have public consultation with the adjacent property owners with any future rezoning, so that there would be collaboration and incorporated into the development proposals at the rezoning level. The new development proposals would also have mitigation design features for adjacent properties and transition areas, so that we are looking for compatible transitional land uses and also to deal with any visual obstructions. To just give you an idea of the comparison, the existing OCP bylaw number 850 from the CSRD, which is RR2, allows a principal building, one primary dwelling and one secondary dwelling, and has a minimum parcel size of 2 hectares. With the proposed land use designation, the principal use may include multifamily or residential or tourist accommodation. It doesn't limit it to multifamily. It allows for a range, so you could still also do single family dwellings as well. The new development would also connect with the city servicing, and the public consultation with neighborhood is required for any new proposals. And the proposals would have to utilize conservation, sensitivity, mitigation measures in the planning of their rezoning applications. So as per the Local Government Act, we have specific requirements for the OCP amendments. Staff have engaged with council and committees regarding the proposed amendments. We did go to APC on August the 17th. APC supported the resort fringe land use designation and provided a resolution. Revelstoke will be updated with a summary of the changes and consultation in advance of the public hearing. A formal public hearing would be required for the OCP amendment. And if council wishes us to do any more consultation before the public hearing, we can do that. So staff are recommending that the official community plan amendment bylaw number 2298 be read a first time.
Thank you, Ms. Wade. Appreciate the presentation. Council, any comments or questions for Ms. Wade? Councillor Palmer and Councillor Charlotte.
Let my colleague go first, please.
Who's first, right? Sure. Thank you, Worship. Just thank you for putting this together so concisely. I appreciate the additional engagement that's happened with the residents of Thomas Brook. While this is maybe an expected shift that maybe could have been done sooner, I'm glad we're getting to it and hopefully can proceed in a timely manner. From what I've seen in this presentation and the report, then I think that quite a bit of community engagement has happened. I'd be comfortable seeing this go to second reading and public hearing to make sure that we can get this done in a timely fashion. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. I do have a few questions. Glad that we've got this on the table.
Sure.
I think it's an important area. As Councillor Charlotte mentioned, it's good that we're getting this done. It would have been nice a long time ago, but we can say that about lots of things. So I think it's, when I look at what we're calling Thomas Brook, it is important to be encouraging vacation rentals. It's an area that really makes sense from my perspective. And so, as we go into, start looking at zoning and all that kind of stuff in the future, I think this is a step towards that way because it just makes sense. I'd like to differentiate when I talk about this fringe or this support area for the resort, in that vacation rental should be that resort experience that we expect. And so one of the concerns that I would have when we go into the zoning is to make sure that this doesn't get limited with the other proposal of vacation or short-term rentals that's there. So it's just one of those things, and I'm not sure how that mechanism will happen in the future, but how do we allow, I think what's in our minds are intended use of a true sort of alpine experience vacation rental. In that respect, I think that this Thomas Brook area, really that this does belong to be resolved even before the other short-term rentals. I'm concerned about the short-term rental bylaw, that it's going to be taken away from accommodation, which we're in a crisis essentially in that area. But this, on the other side, the coin of encouraging the rentals, I think, vacation rentals, I think is important. It's important to do this to address the housing needs because it's just putting more inventory out there. The other thing that I know is how do we encourage housing development by the private sector? And when we look at individuals here in the Thomas Brook, how do we encourage people to create development? And I would like us to look at, especially when we get into the zoning, how do we enable this? And one of the concerns I have, for example, in our suites in the city is like DCCs, and there's high charges that is a disincentive to create housing needs. And so, again, on the short-term rentals, there's people there that will want to make this viable, whatever those individuals, the 22 property owners, whatever aspirations. And so I think that's something that we as council need to look at. How do we make this more viable to encourage the development? Because there is a lot of whether it's VCCs or other taxation or other hoops that we have to get to. So I'd like to see that sped up. I do have a couple questions.
So can I ask for a bit of clarity, Tim? So that zone is, you're saying to make it resort specific vacation rentals. How is this tying into rental space for the residents in town or housing shortage?
Yeah.
So I'm missing the link here.
Yeah, fair. I think that's a fair question. It's my difficulty in articulating it. One of the problems with vacation rentals in general for all the city is as people rent out them legally or illegally, it's taken away from long-term accommodation suites, and that's our workers that we don't have right now because they can't get a place to stay. And so as we create more opportunities for whatever the inventory is, so in this case, vacation rentals, short-term rentals, vacation rentals, in the Thomas Brook, which just makes intuitive sense. The other part is, I think this is a really important area for that. I have reticence on our short-term rental bylaw because it's competing with an area that makes more sense. And so there's a two-step process, but anything to get more inventory in anything to get more inventory, whether that's short-term rentals, suites, housing, whatever it is, I think we need that whole mix there to encourage that. So that's kind of where the link is. That makes sense. It's really the inventory. So I think that's good. As far as zoning goes, that's the next step. This is the OCP, so the vision saying, okay, this is what we envision in that area.
Well, I think it's a holistic approach to housing, which we get to. This is just for Thomasville. This is just getting them comfortable in their space out there. I think, but we have a bigger issue on the housing front that Marianne's trying to get to, and speeding up the process. It's certainly part of that. And removing obstacles is certainly what we want to talk about.
So through the mayor, so exactly, and one of the concerns that I would have with this specific is we're dealing with one little problem area about the holistic look at things. That would be my concern. However, I think we're going the right path. I just don't want to forget the big picture.
So I'm definitely supportive of the motion on the table. It is an OCP amendment, bringing this resort area into the resort fringe so that we can deal with zoning and discuss those things as we move forward. So any further comments regarding the motion to read a first time? Some support or non-support? Councillor Brooks-Hill?
I just have a question in terms of the process. So there's been, I believe Ms. Wade mentioned last meeting, and we're referring to sorting out the zoning in this area. So we're amending the OCP, and then are we going to be creating zoning specific to this resort fringe
Ms. Wade, would you care to answer that, please?
Yes, Your Worship, and through to Councillor Brooks. So the process would be, first of all, we do the land designation, which allows a range of activities. So it could include a short-term rental if that's somebody rezones their property to an R1 or an R2. If we're looking to create a different range, which we're calling tourist accommodation, which is not competing with the short-term rentals, it's actually allowing for another segment of vacation rentals that exist. So for example, the lodge that is out there is like a vacation rental. It has more than 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms, and it's servicing more of a resort tourist type of clientele, similar to what Councillor Palmer was talking to earlier. So it allows for that resort experience there, and that specific zone would be coming forward for council to discuss and vet, because we do have an application for somebody looking to do a tourist accommodation zone there. And so that will be coming forward to council to have a discussion about that. So that is coming along as we go through the process. Then when we go through our bigger zoning comprehensive review, which will come after the OCP, we'll have to look at this area and decide what those zones should be, because they do need to come out of the CSRD zoning bylaw, because the CSRD planning group is waiting for us to do the land use designation and the zoning so that they can amend their OCP and their zoning bylaw. So it's actually the timing of doing this and getting this cleaned up is very important for not only us at the OCP level, dealing with the residents, and also with what needs to happen with the CSRD as well. Did I answer your question, or did I say too much?
You did answer my question, but then you created another question. I don't understand how this relates to the CSRD.
It's currently zoned because it was in the CSRD. It's currently zoned under CSRD standards. We have not changed that. So the idea of the OCP amendment is to bring it into our zoning area here. So right now, everybody out in the Thomas Brook area still has their CSRD zoning.
I understand that, but I don't understand why the CSRD is waiting for us to do this.
Because when you, Ms. Wade, can you just explain that we're going to bring it in?
Yeah, we have to.
Can you stop sharing your screen and go to, we'll go back to the gallery view. Thank you, Ms. Wade.
Okay, hang on. There we go.
There we go.
Okay, so what happens when we annex in land is that it comes with the zoning at the time. And we have an obligation eventually to bring it into our own zoning bylaw. So the CSRD, until we actually amend our OCP and then amend our zoning bylaw, the CSRD has to keep their zoning bylaw and their OCP the way it is, because we have to initiate it and make those changes, and then they can actually amend theirs because we've given it the new zoning and taken it out of the CSRD.
There's what?
Yep.
Mr. Matusi.
Your Worship, just think of it this way, once you annex the land, there's a lot of things that have to happen. One of the things you don't want to have is to just all of a sudden there's no zoning. Like there has to be something. So in the transition, they keep the old zoning, which isn't your zoning. Nothing is based on Revelstoke. And so you have to put in your own designation that matches everywhere else in town. Before you do that though, you have to amend the OCP to give direction to the zoning, right? So once it was transferred, it would have no zoning if they stripped everything off. So this is building Revelstoke zoning on almost like a blank slate. So it's better.
Okay, any other questions, Sheriff? Councilor Palmer, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I did have a few questions for the planner. So the Thomas Brook name is kind of interesting. Someone brought that up to me. Actually, one of the residents in that area said there's the history with the Thomas Brook was actually a water course. And it might be appropriate for it to be Thomas Brook, but it's just sort of an interesting little historical thing. And we're using that term, and I don't think the CSRD was using the Thomas Brook name. It's more of an identifier from the water system that no longer exists. So that's just a comment. When we go to a public hearing on this, so there's been some positive and I think both positive and negative reviews, but that will be, will the comments to date be included in the public hearing? I know there's one party at least that has significant concerns. I was talking to another resident that said that he was going to write a letter in support. Will those things be part of the package?
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer, yes.
And there's referral to a commercial component, I believe, in your report. Is that correct? This wasn't.
A commercial component?
I might be in error.
I don't think.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Oh, I know.
Page 2, tourist commercial development permit area. And I'm just trying to understand so would the OCP be indicating like stores and stuff in that area? I'm just trying to understand that component. Maybe it's something to take a look at, or maybe you can explain that to me.
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer, it's a development permit area that currently exists in our OCP, and this development permit area would just guide the form and character of the development. It doesn't speak to use. So it's just more about how it's landscaped and sited. And it's actually one of our more robust development permit areas. So it's very well suited for this area.
So Ms. Wade, just to confirm, does that mean that there is the potential for retail development in that area?
We have not indicated that so far in the Resort Fringe. Resort Fringe is about tourist accommodation and residential. There might be something in a tourist accommodation where they might have a spa or a restaurant or something like that, which is part of the services that they offer, which will be part of that tourist accommodation. But we're not saying no, we're not saying put retail in there. No.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that clarification. Does that answer your question, Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, I might have more questions
okay.
as we go to the next steps. I think that's most of my points at this point.
Okay. Any other comments or questions regarding the motion that's on the table, reading of the OCP for this area for first time?
I have a question on a bit of the response mechanism we've established is talk Revelstoke as an avenue. People, if they have something to say, they can go to this website. I'm just curious whether how much traffic is how many people are utilizing it? Is there much commentary that comes in through that portal?
Ms. Wade, do you have stats on the Talk Revelstoke for Councillor Elliott?
Through your worship to Councillor Elliott, right on not on the top of my fingertips, but we do go in and we see how many are heading, how many are downloading, etc. And when I did the building bylaw, I talked a little bit about those number of hits. We do have a fair amount of activity right now in regards to the OCP update. And we've had some responses on the short-term rental as well. The exact numbers I could send you, I can update you if you'd like those. I can send you an email with those stats if you'd like.
Yeah, it's just it's the avenue the public have to get news or information to us and how they feel. So it's important it's well utilized or publicized that this is there. Anyway, thank you.
Any other further comments on this first reading of the OCP Amendment Bylaw 2298? Councillor Brooks Hill.
I'm supportive of this. I think it's the right idea for this area, and this is just kind of the broad strokes at this stage, and I'm fully supportive of going forwards with it and then getting down to the details, the devil's in the details, but I think this is, as was already mentioned, past due to be done.
All right. Any other comments, Councillor Elliott?
Nicole, you were saying go to second reading. You suggested that as a...
I think if I could, when we were talking at the previous council meeting, we were talking about this bylaw amendment, or the OCP amendments going forward, was that going to first reading and having some space till second reading allowed the staff to be able to go back to the community and engage a little more before we got ready for a public hearing. In this case, I think the staff have done a fantastic job of engaging with the residents of the area and providing more opportunity for people to engage, including doing some one-on-one. That being acknowledged, I think it would be safe enough to go to a second reading and direct staff to schedule the public hearing.
Any other comments on that? Ms. Wade, do you have any, Councillor Palmer, do you have a question first?
I was probably say that you were going to ask the planner on the second reading, any sort of perspective on that.
Yeah, Ms. Wade?
Through your worship to Councillors Palmer and Schlett, I would, if council's comfortable moving forward with putting second reading on the table today, then that would be preferred by staff because we could move forward and get ready for the public hearing.
Okay, so if you're comfortable, let's vote on the first reading, and then I'll get you to put another motion on for second reading, and then we can vote on that. Are you guys okay with that? Okay, so any further comments on the first reading? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Now, does anyone want to put that motion on? So Councillor Schlett or Councillor Palmer, either one of you. Councillor Palmer, go ahead.
So I move that official community plan amendment bylaw 2298 be read a second time.
And seconded by Councillor Schlett. Any further discussion on this? Councillor Palmer.
So Mayor Sulz, Council, this has been a dialogue. I think we've been approached by various residents. I went out to seek some others out there to get sort of a perspective. I think there's been a lot of dialogue, and I don't think there's much more to be accomplished by waiting for another second reading. I think it's going to just be more of the same chatter.
Right.
I do have some concerns. I think I have all the information right now that I can sort of drill in, but I think most of those concerns are going to be coming more from the zoning perspective.
Yes.
It's how I see where some of the concerns that I have, that this is directly related to the OCP. So I think we're ready to go to a public hearing, get all that information in an official manner. I think a lot of us have had it there before, making sure there is that inclusion of all the voices out there, and so we can consider that. So that's why I'm supportive of going to second reading.
Great. Any other comments on going to second reading? I'm definitely supportive of this going to second reading. It will allow our staff then to schedule a public hearing and move this along. Seeing no further comments, all those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. And Councillor Brooks Hill.
Oh, just does staff want the motion to schedule the public hearing that's in the package?
Yes, if someone want to make a motion to go to public hearing. Councillor Brooks Hill, Councillor Schlett. No further discussion. We'll go to public hearing, give staff direction to do that. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you, Ms. Wade. We are leaving it with you to schedule a public hearing.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to 11A, Community Economic Development EOF funding application. And there is a motion on the table here, and I'm going to see if I can actually see who all of my staff are that are here. Ms. Braun, are you here?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I can. Sorry, I couldn't see you on my computer. But you're here. Do you want to make any comments or presentation before I put the motion on the table? Or
Go ahead. I can speak to some of the background information if required, but there's no presentation.
okay, good. So I'm going to ask someone to put this motion on the table. Councillor Brooks-Hill.
That a recommendation be made to the CSRD to allocate $30,000 from the Economic Opportunity Fund for the current year to the Revelstoke Cycling Association to support the maintenance of existing recreational and mountain bike trails.
Second for the motion, Councillor Charlotte. Okay, just some background on this. This did come to the CSRD board. They're supportive of this, waiting for input from this council. So, Ms. Brown, I'll just ask you to just elaborate on the maintenance bike trails, which bike trails, if there are any in particular, that will be maintained with this.
Yes, through your worship. The initial ask was for 150,000 or 30,000 over 5 years, but in speaking with Director Brooks-Hill, David Brooks-Hill, that is from the CSRD, the director for Area B, we discussed the fact that there's still a number of concerns expressed by residents in the community about how trails are developed and maintained in their backyards. And until we have a clear process for rectifying those concerns, working with Flinward and Rec Sites and Trails BC, as well as making sure we have a transparent process in place to support any recreation groups that wish to access EOF funds for trail maintenance, we thought it best to proceed 1 year at a time. We're working in the background with city administration and CSRD administration to come up with a fair and transparent process for applying to EOF funds. And included in that will be some contract compliance measures put in place to ensure that we have expectations about how the money will be spent and where it will be spent. And that would be in line with our resort development strategy contracts that we currently put in place to provide guidance and compliance around how we spend RMI money. So we're looking to create a similar kind of process that will mirror the allocation of EOF funds to how we allocate RMI funds in order to make the process more transparent and have the recipients be more accountable. So that's essentially the background to this. Similar to how RMI funds are spent in concert with or guided by our resort development strategy, we would look to the EOF to spend or allocate funds that are aligned with our economic development strategy for the city and Area B.
Great, thank you. Councillor Charlotte.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is great to hear, especially the mention of the BRAC process, the Backcountry Recreation Access Plan. I know this was a lot of conversation over the last year, so I'm grateful to hear that it is still ticking along in the background. I know that will be a longer process. I'm curious, Your Worship, if when we talk about transparency in the work that we do, to Councillor Elliott's point earlier, is Talk Revelstoke needs all the support it can get to be our portal for public engagement and awareness. I'm wondering if Ms. Braun can explain a little bit about the plan for that transparency, and is there a way, and this may already be in the works, but just what that will look like, and if there's a role for Talk Revelstoke to play in that process?
Through your worship, yes, that is the intent for sure. We are just embarking on those discussions with our regional partners, beginning with our First Nations partners, and awaiting some direction from Flinward as to how we embark on backcountry recreation access planning. And so when we have kind of the go-ahead or the direction from the ministry, we'll work closely with Mayor Sulz and Director Brooks-Hill to implement a process. And I would envision using Talk Revelstoke as a key tool to kind of get input, especially now that we're going again into restrictions on public gathering. But this is all underway, as we speak. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
It sure does. Thank you.
Any further comments, Councillor Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. Thank you for the presentation. Actually, the verbal presentation was helpful. It answered some of my questions, specifically the interaction with Director Brooks-Hill and the backcountry use. And I appreciate that you're looking at just this year, because we really do need to take a better look at the picture. I think that's critical. It's a lot of money. the mountain bike industry, of course, is really, it's growing, that tourism aspect, so it's really important for us. But we want to get this right and not just be throwing money because it's a good thing. One question with the residents, and I think that's one of the sensitive areas, and really they, I think, need to be talking to Director Brooksdale, and they probably have, on their concerns in that area. But one of the concerns that I heard was on impacts of their water licensing. And I'm just wondering if that's unresolved. And the second part is whether some of these funds should be conditional on ensuring there's protection of water, the rights of people's water in that area. And also I think there's some erosion concerns and that kind of thing. So if you can make any comment on that, I don't know enough to be putting, a conditional statement on here that'd be conditional on that, but if you could just comment to that, that'd be helpful.
I think Ms. Brown, we're talking about the Sunnyside area, and I just want to confirm whether these funds are basically dealing with the bike trails in that area. So if you go ahead and answer Councillor Palmer's question.
Through your worship, I don't think there's any specific activities tied to this first year of funding. There's 2 points I would want to make. One is that RMI funding is tied to creation of new trails, and RMI funding was spent to develop Sunnyside, but the EOF funds that they're applying for are for maintenance on trails that are not funded through RMI, and in fact RMI doesn't cover a maintenance of existing trails. So it may be that the initial work being done is to do repair work on or maintenance work on other trails, not Sunnyside. With regards to Sunnyside, I would have to defer to the jurisdictional authority in place on Crown land, which is Flynn Road. So Rec Sites and Trails BC does have a partnership agreement in place with the with RCA, the Revelstoke Cycling Association, and they have brought in their experts working for the Crown to assess and look at how the work complies with their standards and what mitigation is required to get the sign off from Flynn Road. So it's really their jurisdictional issue with regards to how water and runoff and trail maintenance and trail building occur. So I have been in discussions with the local representative for Rec Sites and Trails BC, and I was not able to speak with her before providing this report, but I can certainly follow up and get more clarification on that specific trail network. But in general, if we're looking at a contract that would allow us to follow up with the groups that receive EOF funding, I would want to make sure that we had Rec Sites and Trails input into that mechanism.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. That's really helpful, and I think it's a good reminder that we're making a decision on behalf of the greater area, but the specific details is in the regional district area. So I think that's helpful. Thanks.
And having sitting on the CSRD board, I think when this originally came, back when we were talking about a bigger dollar figure, my understanding was the maintenance of the existing trails did not include that sunny side area. So just for clarification. Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Elliott.
Just in general, the economic impact from mountain biking as our alternative or off-season for winter is very significant.
Yes.
And the contribution that the bicycle RC Revelstoke Cycling Association, they put in time and effort that they put into making those trails and building, and that's free and donated to our, and everyone in our downtown core probably benefits from, or the bars or the restaurants, the hotels. It's very, very impacted by that work. We're contributing $30,000, or the CSRT has put $30,000 to maintain the trails. There's no building new. So if you want to become a mountain bike destination on a different level, it means investing in something more, and putting more money into the network. And Sunnyside is an issue. It is a sore spot, and I think they all realize that something went wrong there. And I think they're trying to rectify it. But I think if we really want to say we're going to be a resort community, mountain biking has to be a part of it. And $30,000 a year it's peanuts in the total. Go to the cusp, and they've got $1 million facility that's from the Columbia Basin Trust, and I just say, that's the scale of what we could be. This is what we're contributing at 30,000 at maintenance. So I think we should be starting thinking on a broader picture, economically, socially, culturally, as our town, what it's about.
And you just brought up CBT, so there may be an opportunity there for this group to talk to CBT as we move forward as well. Councillor Brooks, did you have a question or comment?
More just a comment. I know historically with the RCA, I couldn't comment on this. It's like from a few years ago, but talking to some of the people involved, and their conundrum was basically that they could get funding to build trails, but they could never get funding to maintain them. And like, so building all these new trails, and meanwhile the ones we built 10 years ago are just falling apart. And so I do think that this is important work, because, you know, it's great to build new trails, but if you're talking about environmental impact, if you're just as the trails age, you know, you start having all these runoff issues and like erosion issues, and maintenance is an important component for that. But if you can only get money to build trails, you're just going to build trails endlessly and let the other ones fall apart.
I think that's really.
I don't think anyone wants to see that. So I think, you know, the EOF money, they're trying to access that, and, you know, the RCA, I know, want to be good community members. It's, you know, there's no ill intent in all of these things. There's just some, like you said, there was some mistakes were made and things like that. But then there's also just this reality that the resort money will only fund new trails, so they can get money for trails, but they want to maintain the old trails too. And I think this is a good compromise, and I'm really happy to hear Ms. Braun say that she's working on creating these mechanisms so there's more transparency, there's a better process, because I don't think we should be, you know, signing off on a 5-year deal to maintain these trails without those layers of responsibility that we have to have for public money going to any organization.
Great, appreciate your comment. Any further comments on the motion on the table?
I would say that the Sunnyside thing has been real thorn for the bike club and the trail development in town, and it stalled it for 2 years. And if we continue to let it stall, it's 3 years. So it's going to be something we should overcome quickly. And I don't know what stage it's at, but it needs to be resolved.
Yeah, and I think the plan, they're in the works of dealing with that. So, all right, any further comments regarding the EOF fund, 30 grand? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Sorry, Ms. Braun, you have a comment?
I just was going to provide a bit more context that when you're talking about the business model for, you know, the volunteer, you know, investment that goes into maintaining these trails, that's a really important consideration as we go forward and identify this mechanism for funding maintenance, because other groups like the Nordic Center or the Snowmobile Society, they're able to generate revenue through their, you know, membership fees and through their gateways and their access to the trails. So I think it really is important to come up with a system that is fair and transparent to all recreation groups and takes a look at the different business models that are in place right now.
Appreciate that. Any further comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. We're going to move on to item 11B, liquid waste management stage 3 approval. Someone put that motion on the table for me, please. Councillor Charlotte?
That the stage 3 liquid waste management plan be adopted.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Elliott. Mr. Black, you are here. Ms. Becker, you are here. Do you want to give any presentation or input before we ask questions?
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a short presentation I would like to share with council and the public.
Right.
Can you see it, please?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So today we
Can you speak up just a little bit, Mr. Black, so we can hear you?
Can you hear me now, sir?
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you.
My apologies. Today we're looking to adopt stage 3 of the liquid waste management plan with short presentation. Why are we doing this? Well, we're operating under a wastewater permit from 1970s. It's old, we're grandfathered. It's time to update it and operate under current conditions. As we are close to capacity with our plant, if we do not undertake the improvements, the province will direct us to make improvements, and the liquid waste management plan will allow us to have a guide for the future that council and the community can get behind and afford. This liquid waste management plan was used to apply for a grant funding. If we're successful, which I'm pleased to say we were, we'll provide significant funding for this project. As we presented this report in for stage 2 a couple months ago, council was aware of the cost of our plant of about $15 million. So here we are. We're ready to adopt, and then we submit to the province for adoption and acceptance, and then we move forward to implementing our plan. What is that plan? It's to build a plant at the existing facility by adding mechanical components. We stay within the existing footprint. We will be in compliance with federal regulations. It will be climate change resilient, and it will be a sustainable use of our existing infrastructure. We're not going to have to move out of this site to have a plant that functions well into the future. This plant has also been designed to accommodate the future growth in the community for the next 20 years for up to a population of 27,000 people. So as I just stated previously, the capital cost is about $14.6 million. We just received a grant for $9.8 million. So we do have a little bit of funding to find, and working with our finance department, we will be probably utilizing the municipal funding sources to borrow money to complete the project. Our schedule here is about 3 years from adoption by the province, acceptance by the province, to completion of the project, which means we as engineering staff will be extremely busy for a few years here. We did do significant public engagement in this process. Talk Revelstoke, lots of online interaction. We also had a technical and public advisory committee. And where we are now, we've received positive feedback on our alternative. And we are asking today that council approve stage 3 of the liquid waste management plan. And upon that action, staff will then proceed to forward this information, our liquid waste management plan, to the province for approval. Thank you. That concludes my brief presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Again, I want to, as I said to you in person the other day, I want to thank you so much for the work that you've done in the grant process, getting that announcement from the government, giving us that almost $10 million to move towards this is significant, and it makes it viable now for us to move forward. So I'm grateful for that. Council, any comments? Councillor Elliott.
So the $10 million, does that come from the federal government or the provincial?
It comes from both. It's a combination of the two. It's a Canadian infrastructure grant, and it came from both. Ms. Becker, Mr. Black, do you want to make any comment on that?
I have nothing more to add, Your Worship. That is correct. It is a combination of both federal and provincial money. And we're very pleased to see that come to the table.
Oh, that's magic. That's really good.
Yeah. Any other comments, Councillor Rind, and then Councillor Brooks?
Yeah, is any of the project
cost allow for staffing internally to manage the project, or is that all? Like, I know at one point, Mr. Black was mentioning that there was some capacity constraints in the department. Was that factored into the budgeting of this project?
I believe so, but Mr. Black, I'll get you to weigh in because Ms. Becker is here from McElhaney, and she's been leading on this. But Mr. Black, any comment for Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor, to Councillor Ryan. We have not yet determined what our future long-term staffing needs are. We do understand at this point in time that we are short-staffed, and a project of this magnitude will probably require the dedication of at least one full-time staff member. And in lieu of that, the opportunity to contract for a 2 or 3 year period for this staff person or as a consultant may be prudent. However, we have not yet addressed that. Once the project is complete, the demand for staff time may or may not be adequate. We may not have the demand after the project is complete. So we want to move carefully and slowly into impacts to the long-term budget and staffing needs with this project coming forward.
So it's not in the budget currently?
Correct. We do not have a staff person outlined for this project for the department at this time.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Brook.
I'm just curious, Mr. Black, do you have any kind of ballpark estimate how long ministry approval might take?
I would defer to Ms. Becker from McElhaney on that.
Yes, the ministry during stage 2 did a thorough review of the report and had very few comments, all positive. We've incorporated those into stage 3. They've been very integrated into this process, so we expect their approval to be rather quick. We don't expect to have many edits. That's always a possibility, and then we would come back. But at this point, we've incorporated everything that they have asked for, very reasonable, and expect a positive outcome quickly.
Great, thank you. Any other comments, Council? Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. Thank you to staff for your work on this. It was an honor to be on the steering committee with the mayor and Councillor Elliott, and I was very impressed in general about innovative approaches and how that's moved along quite well. There's always concerns about community engagement, especially nowadays in COVID world, but this is something that I would say that is really good for the community. A couple questions. One, you talked about engineering staffing. Operationally, does this change will this change our certification requirements or number of employees for operations once it's built?
My understanding, Mayor, to Councillor Palmer, is that because we're maintaining the lagoon type system, that the staffing and certification levels that we have will be continue to be adequate, and we will not be required to upgrade certification for operating staff.
And then specifically, so is this what level of plant? I know it's a little bit technical, but I'm just curious what level of plant is it today, and what will it be after it's completed?
I would defer to Mr. Rokich from McElhaney for that question.
Good afternoon, everybody. So yeah, the facility is right now, I think, classified as class 2, and it's expected to stay at the same classification level after this upgrade, because in essence, it's not going to add any significant complexity to the existing process.
And then Mayor Sulz, the other one was, smell. I know we've talked about this at the committee level. And that I think the community might note that we haven't had any significant odor outbreaks this year. And it was a hot year, so I was saying, well, what happened there? And I know one of the operators mentioned that we also have a lot less people eating greasy chips this year. And grease is a big part of the smell issue. Now this design, if I'm understanding correctly, isn't specifically designed around the smell issues, but with improvements of operation, that this will help mitigate possible smell issues in the future. And I know there's more work that needs to be done on what they were calling fog, fats,
Oils and grease.
Fats, oils and grease. So some comments on that, but I'll do one public service announcement. Don't put grease down the drain. Don't put grease down the drain, but if you could just comment on the smell issues, the opportunities and limitations of the improvements from this plan.
Mr. Black.
Thank you, Mayor, and to Councillor Palmer. Again, I'll defer to Mr. Rokich.
So there will be two components to this. During design, retrofit design, we'll look into possibilities to improve the aeration component in the existing lagoon and to minimize the odor component. But there will also be, we also recommended that a local FOG, fat oil and grease bylaw, be introduced so to speak, to the community, so that the FOG component of fog is sort of a controlled, can be controlled from the commercial, institutional, and industrial facilities to help with the odor component. Based on the experience from the operators of the wastewater treatment facility, the fog creates some odor issues, and a consideration to a local FOG bylaw would definitely help to address also that component.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Sulz. And I think that's an important thing to recognize, that there's still more work to be done, especially on the bylaw that has some teeth. If there's any restaurants or businesses that are dumping oils and fats and greases. And so that's another little component. But thank you. I think it's important for the community to understand some of the limitations on this.
Yeah,
as far as
I think it would be great. And when we talk about the fog situation, Ms. Becker, you had done a presentation a few years ago regarding this. There's some way that we could actually get that presentation onto our website for others to see it. I think once people saw what our staff have to go to clean some of our mains and clean some of our switches and that sort of thing, physically go and wash them with high pressure washers, they would understand the costs of grease going down. And not only that, the grease floating on the surface of our lagoons is one of the issues with smell. So definitely, any comment regarding that, Ms. Becker?
Agree, Your Worship. The fog bylaw wouldn't just be a bylaw, but it would also have a significant community engagement component that would be for the general community, but also the commercial business operators that could be contributing to fog. I do think that as part of that, pictures from what the operators have to deal with would be an excellent idea. I know that the operator, Doug, said he has even additional pictures of more fog buildup. So that is a great way to really show people the impact of things like flushing or, rinsing butter and, dressings and fats and things and vegetable oil down the sink, and how that ends up, doesn't just disappear, it still ends up as a city problem and something to be maintained and cost money.
All right, thank you for that. All right, any further comments on the management plan being adopted? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you, Mr. Black and McElhaney staff. Appreciate the work that you've done in getting this to us at this point, and we're looking forward to it going to for the province, Ms. Becker, so that they can say, hip hip hooray, you guys carry on. So thank you so much, appreciate that. All right, we're going to go on to item 11C, amendment to the annual operating agreement with BC Transit. Someone want to put that motion on the table? Councillor Burkhill.
That the amended annual operating agreement AOA with BC Transit to cost share the provision of transit services in the community for 2021 to 2022 be approved. And that the Chief Administrative Officer be authorized to sign the amended AOA for 2021 to 22.
Someone want to second that? Councillor Charlotte. Any comments on this, Mr. Black or Ms. Brown, regarding this annual operating agreement with BC Transit?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, this is an information report to council. It's a good news report that we're trying to encourage new riders to the system by providing free transit service to those 12 and under starting September 1st. And we are very pleased that this is happening as the opportunity to create a new clientele for transit begins at a young age. And so I'm happy to see this come forward. It's revenue neutral to the city, as the province will be providing the differential for the riders that are coming. So it's a good news story. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Council, any comments or questions? Councillor Palmer.
I was going to try and resist the temptation to speak on this one, but so these the 12 under 12 kids, when you're riding on the bus and nobody else is on that, think about tax dollars, the gas that's being consumed. We need to change on how we're doing transit. So regardless of what Mr. Black said regarding about getting good habits, don't let the bad habit of having the perpetuation of empty buses going around burning fuels. Anyway, that's for another topic.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. All right, any further comments? Councillor Charlotte, and then Councillor Ali.
I just wanted to note, it's interesting to see what these promises look like from senior levels of government. I remember hearing BC MVP talking about this promise, and now it's nice to see it come through full circle to our municipal tables and showing what that looks like on the ground to make it revenue neutral so that it is a group effort. That being said, I agree with Councillor Palmer. I'm excited to fix our transit system so it's more functional for those kids. I remember riding the bus lots when I was a kid, and it was an important part of freedom in the community without needing a car. So it has its trade-offs.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the kids with the skateboard under their arm getting on the bus and moving around the community. I think it's going to be kind of cool. Councillor Elliott.
I think it's fantastic we're getting people to use the mass transit rather than individual transit. But I don't think the kids are driving, or maybe indirectly, they get the bus instead of having the mom drive them somewhere, but or dad or whatever. But ideally, you get the adults using the bus, and the people who are driving who have the car more often and on the road. They're the ones who run it directly. That's my take. I'm looking at trying to change our transit system as well, but I think this is a step. I'm looking for more feedback. I'd like to see the results. What kind of usership they get from these kids, and maybe we can amplify it in the future.
Perfect. Good. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Black. Appreciate that. Today's engineering day here on council table. So we're going to move on to item 11D, 4th Street traffic calming options. So I'm going to ask Councillor to put that on the table, please. Councillor Brookson.
The temporary 4th Street traffic calming improvements, bollard, curb extensions, paint, and signage at the following 3 intersections on 4th Street, Moss, Edward, and Downey be implemented.
Seconder for the motion, please. And that. Thank you.
An additional $30,000 be allocated from the Transportation Infrastructure Reserve to fund the traffic calming improvements.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Charlotte, thank you. I love it when I kind of short circuit it because you're all looking at me going, what the hell are you doing? Anyway, thank you. Any comments or any questions on this? I'm going to go to Mr. Black. Mr. Black is here, and Mr. Komanowski, do you have comments, or you would like to give a little presentation?
Mayor, thank you. I would love to give you a small presentation regarding this. Here it comes.
Here it goes. And pause.
So a few months ago, city staff and council received a petition and numerous comments from the public on the 4th Street area of town regarding safety issues. And at that time, staff or council directed staff to return to council with a report on opportunities to improve the situation for the traveling public, for the families in the area, and to make 4th Street basically from the roundabout to the Silhouette River Bridge safer for the community. In light of that, staff consulted with one of our traffic engineers and summarized the residents' concerns into these basic 5 items. We've got a lot of families in the area, aggressive driving behavior, many heavy vehicles using the road now to access the south end of town, and the heavy or large amount of construction activities occurring at that end of town. People speeding and vehicles, many more vehicles on the road. Higher traffic volumes is what I'm trying to say. Where it's out there, we see roughly 10,000 vehicles a day using that section of road. The speed limit's 50. We've got a 20-meter wide road width. It's a big road to cross. We have sidewalks on both sides of 4th Street. We've got cyclists that use it, and it's also a BC transit and shuttle route. In the last 5 years, we've seen approximately, well, not approximately, but 17 collisions with damages over the last 5 years, and 5 of the collisions resulted in injuries. So a total of 22 accidents, some with injuries in that area. The highest number of collisions occurred at Edwards and 4th. In 2016, there was a couple incidents. In 2020, we've seen 8 incidents. So based upon the use of the road, which is an arterial road, the transportation guidelines and pedestrian safety guidelines in the province and the federal guidelines dictate that we should be considering the following items as opportunities to calm the traffic and make people feel safe. Horizontal deflections, narrowing the road, extending the sidewalks into the intersection so that you don't have 20 meters of pavement to cross, but maybe 10 meters of pavement to cross. Improving our pavement markings, perhaps putting some medians in the center of the road to channelize cars, providing left turn signals or left turn pockets, and improve signage. And so based upon the opportunities that are outlined by traffic guidelines, we've decided, or we're presenting here today, materials that we can be utilizing for traffic calming. Costs here are pretty extensive. $15,000 for bollards, $50,000 for rubber curbs, $70,000 for no post concrete barriers, and decorative barriers at $100,000 per intersection. And then if we want to go even further, we can look at doing solar powered pedestrian signals. Staff are recommending that we go with the temporary bollard option with line painting and signage at the 3 intersections on 4th at Downey, Edward, and Moss. The reason we are doing so is that it's cost effective. It's relatively simple to design and construct. And so we've made the assumption that we're going to be looking at about $5,000 per intersection for design costs, or $20,000 per intersection to give us the total cost for those 3 intersections of $60,000. Staff are recommending that we continually review and evaluate the effectiveness of the traffic calming measures and going in place. And in conjunction with completion of the transportation master plan, excuse me, develop some permanent solutions for this area, which we can then implement over the coming years. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Black. I appreciate that. I know, Mr. Kolanowski, you were here, and we did this at Edward and Fourth some years ago, right by Southside. Give us a little bit of safety in that area. As we see more of the roundabouts being built, people will be coming from Mark. They will have a straight through shot right to downtown. So having some safety here for our residents in that area and some way for them to cross safely as they move along as a pedestrian or a cyclist is really important. So I'm definitely supportive of this as we move forward. Mr. Kolanowski, do you have any comments before I ask council if they have any comments or questions?
I do not, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Palmer?
Can we go to gallery view?
Yes, can you stop sharing, Mr. Black? We'll go to gallery view again.
So, just further to your comment, Sulz, on the traffic calming that was done a few years ago, it was taken out, it seems.
Yeah, it was done for a period of time. There was some safety issues right at Southside Grocery. Of course, the light is a block up at Downey and Fourth. It was put in there during the time Mount Baby School was there and is yet to be moved. Now that we may have potential, or we will have housing on there, it may be prudent to leave that light at that intersection. We may make some improvements on the other intersection as we go forward. But I'll have Mr. Kolanowski or Mr. Black actually speak to those sorts of things. Do you have a specific question regarding what we did before, Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, if there was some problems with that or why it was taken out, what we learned from that, I just want to make sure we're not repeating something, because I just don't know on those there was some temporary things there, or semi-temporary, and they were taken out, so I'm just sort of wondering the context and how that applies as far as learnings going into this round of experiments.
Mr. Kolanowski, do you want to weigh in at all? I think that was prior to Mr. Black arriving here, and Mr. Black, you may have that information in front of you. Do you mind if I ask Mr. Kolanowski, or do you have the information?
Your Worship, Mr. Kolanowski, if you've got any information, please.
Yeah, Your Worship, that was done by Dave Dean through ICBC. It was a study that we did as a sort of a traffic or assessment on signage, and he suggested that just go up for a temporary basis to see if there was some results on traffic calming. So it was there for a temporary basis. I think it was 6 weeks it was implemented for, and by no means would it have any altering of this project that Mr. Black had just discussed.
All right. Any other comments?
Was it successful? Like, did that trial, did you learn something, or was it successful? It seemed like I was a bit surprised when it came out, saying, okay, maybe it wasn't perfect, but it was something compared to nothing.
Yeah, there was some signs of traffic calming for certain. The one area that it didn't help with is it was the pedestrian crossing. So as Mr. Black is saying, having the narrower crossings will give people pedestrian refuge, I guess is what it's called. So that was one area that it had no success in. but it did slow people down just because it was a physical barrier. And as Mr. Black just said, having a physical barrier and a narrower passage for pedestrian crossing will have a great effect on Fourth on those intersections.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Lake.
Just on that experiment, I think there were those flexible in the middle of the road.
Look at porcupine quills.
Yeah, so they didn't really offer any real protection. I mean, you ran into it, you bent to give way, but I guess it did slow people down, but people took it as target practice after a while. So, yeah.
Well, I think you might have a point there, but we're talking about paint too, and so sometimes it's just as we've seen with highways, what MCON has done, Ministry of Transport, is there are illusions with paint and whatnot that work to slow traffic down, and I think this is all part of that sort of thing, is it not, Mr. Black, that there'll be some sort of safety mechanism here that will make people feel safer, and actually, I guess the whole idea is to see if it works to calm traffic down, correct?
Your Worship, you're absolutely correct. And again, this will be an implementation of a temporary solution, yielding to a permanent solution, which I believe will provide those safe zones, the narrower passageways. In narrowing the roads too, provides a place so that the pedestrians can enter safely onto the pavement, but still be behind structure so that people can then see them at the same time. They are not going to be jumping onto the pavement behind a parked car, tentatively looking out to see whether or not somebody's going to see them at those intersections. This is a somewhat proven technology, and we will implement it, observe it, and make it better in the future.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions, Councillor Brookfield?
I just want to say I think this is great, and I'm really happy that something's being done quickly. It's a great example of people bringing a problem to the city, to staff and council, and something getting done in a timely fashion.
Yeah, really appreciate the staff hearing the community members and seeing this coming to fruition. I'll ask again, any further comments? Seeing none, I'll ask the question. All those in, all those in favor? Motion's carried, thank you. Appreciate that. Just before we go on to the next motion, Mr. Komanowski, you're here. I don't know whether you were here earlier during the mayor's announcement, but I just, before we share the screen, Mr. Komanowski, I want to thank you for your 28 years here with the city of Revelstoke. You and I have known each other for that 28 years and we're together. And you and I got very little hair left. But anyway, I want to thank you so much for the work that you've done on behalf of the citizens of Revelstoke. We appreciate you being at the helm of our Public Works Department. I know the staff here are all saying the same thing. We are so appreciative of what you've done. We're going to miss you. We look forward to seeing you on the street and wish you all the best in retirement. But again, I want to say thank you for all that you've done for us.
Thank you very much, Your Worship and Council. And I just want to thank the city of Revelstoke for all the opportunities given myself and my family. It's greatly appreciated. And I've enjoyed my time, and I plan on residing in Revelstoke and enjoying what it has to offer with a little more time on hand now.
Awesome. Glad to hear that. Again, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Councillor, any comments? Seeing none, and we're going to move on. Thank you. We're going to move on to item 11E, Ill Silhouette Bridge repairs. So someone want to put that motion on the table for me, please. Councillor Palmer.
The Big Bend Isle construction be awarded the city of Revelstoke Ill Silhouette Bridge repairs 2021, tender reference number 2021-03, in the amount of $237,900 plus GST.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Ryan. A nice round figure. Yes. Mr. Black, do you have anything, or Mr. Kamenowski, that you want to say regarding Illisilowith Bridge?
Your worship, yeah, we put it out to tender through Watson Engineering was our consultant, and they recently have done a report on our bridges exclusively in 2019, and some of the bigger repairs that came forward of that report were the Illisilowith Bridge deck seals and some of the work on the decking. So only 2 bids were received. One was substantially higher than the other, as you see. We're not really certain why that was the case. I guess we're just seeing some really obscure unit prices, as we discussed previously with some other projects with the Greenbelt. Thankfully, Vic Van Al came forward with a price that was within our budget. So yeah, we think that we should proceed with this before the winter season.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Mayor Sulz, through the mayor. There was a reference in the Watson report regarding jurisdiction with the Ministry of Transportation and the city. There seems to be a little bit of ambiguity, at least their language. It was such that there seemed to be some ambiguity. And when we're talking about the structure versus the decking, and it seemed to me like even like the fixing of the rails, is that structure versus decking. And is there any comment on that? Is that something that we should be looking at a little bit in more detail? Is there, I know this was, the secondary highways were a gift from some government a couple decades to municipalities empowering us. It's basically just downloading, but I'm just sort of concerned about where, whose jurisdiction on that. And I guess the other sort of secondary question with that is, was there a more robust engineering study paid by the province on the structure itself? Those, I guess, are the 2 questions that I have.
Great, thank you. Mr. Kamenowski, any comment?
To my knowledge, Your Worship, I have not seen any more thorough plans from the ministry on the plans of the bridges. There is shared ownership of some of our bridges, undoubtedly. What we're undertaking now is what our responsibilities are, obviously, with the decking. Same with the Big Eddy, the structure, the decking, the lights, the pathways are all ours. The Townley Bridge is ours. And then with the Illisilowith, the structures ministry, and then we're responsible for decking and railing and the sort of the annual maintenance. But outside of that, I'm not aware of any other further reports. Maybe Mr. Black is.
Black?
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer. As I don't know much of the long-term history of this area, I would be pleased to come back to council with a better handle on what those obligations are for the city and for the ministry, so that we are sure that we're doing our due diligence and also not overspending on things that the community should not be paying for. However, the other side of that is we may find out we need to be paying for more. However, let me come back to council with a information report on the status of our bridges and what the maintenance obligations, O&M obligations are for those bridges.
Thanks. Councillor Ryan.
Yes, is the goal to have this work completed before the snow falls?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
Councillor Charlotte and Councillor Elliott.
Just further to that, I'm curious about the timeline of it and what kind of disruption we can expect in the traffic. As we were just talking about, 4th Street needs some calming, but there is some heavy traffic going through there.
Your worship, I can comment on that. It will be single lane alternating, so not significant impacts for, there will not be full closures. So traffic will be probably fluctuating, single lane alternating in the 5-minute intervals.
Councillor,
We had a pipeline going through the river. Was it the Illisilowith Bridge or another bridge that we had being repaired?
So that's the sewage pipeline underneath the Trans-Canada.
Oh, okay. Has that been done?
I believe it has been. Is that the TCH septic line completed yet, Mr. Black?
Through your worship to Councillor Elliott, yes, it was completed. And it was completed approximately a month and a half, 2 months ago.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry for. No, that's fine. Any other comments regarding the Illicillowit Bridge? Seeing none, I'll ask the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate the input. Going to move on to item 11F, Parks, Rec and Culture. This is the joint use agreement for the school board. Someone want to put that motion on the table for us, please? Councillor Brookshill.
Did the city enter into a new agreement with the Board of Education of School District number 19 for joint use of city and school facilities for a 5-year term, and that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to sign on behalf of the city?
Seconder for the motion, please, Councillor Charlotte. Any comments from staff regarding this motion? Mr. Nato, I see you're here.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not too much to add, some minor housekeeping items. I met with the superintendent of school district earlier this month. We reviewed the contract and agreed to the changes.
Great, thank you. Any comments from council? Seeing none, I'll ask the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nato. Appreciate your work in dealing with this. Moving on to item 11G, Economic Development, Council Endorsement for Overdose Prevention Week. I'll ask for someone to put the motion on the table. Councillor Charlotte.
The request from Community Connections recognize International Overdose Awareness Day by displaying purple ribbons and signage on light posts along Mackenzie Avenue be endorsed.
Second for the motion, please. Councillor Brooks-Hill. Discussion on the motion. Ms. Braun, do you want to make comment?
Not at this time, Your Worship.
All right. Any questions of Ms. Braun or comments that you have, Council? Seeing none, I will ask the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Braun. We will definitely endorse that. Moving forward, going on to communications, water main plan, letter from Mr. Maltby. Does any council have any comment on that? Councillor Brooksville.
I couldn't really understand what, it seemed like the pertinent part was redacted for some reason. I take it the fire hydrant's being moved and it's impacting him.
It impacts him just briefly one day when they're trying to find the right valve to shut it off. I understand that that the hydrant is now replaced. Is that correct, Mr. Komanowski? If you're still there, Mr. Black, that hydrant has been replaced. They're now going to replace the sidewalk in front of the hydrant, and they'll get that done fairly quickly. And so, Mr. Komanowski, any comment on that?
Yes, that has been, as you had mentioned, Your Worship, that is correct. It has been replaced.
Great, thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz, and thank you to staff for the hydrant replacement program. It's good to see that happening. I did take the opportunity to take a look at that, and I would hope that the residents in the area are appreciating that they have better fire protection for their structures in that area, and it looked quite appropriate and non-intrusive and appropriate. So just appreciation of staff for continuing the hydrant program. I do have a comment just while I can on the hydrants. A little what I would like to see is our hydrants painted red. I know this is a cosmetic thing and there's some history, but just sort of a little indicator, something that staff could take a look at, you know, why the yellow. It was a trendy thing back in the 70s. I think they look really ugly, and it'd be nice to have nice red hydrants.
Any comments on that, Mr. Komanowski?
I think I might take the fifth on that one, Your Worship.
Probably good advice. I have spoken with Chief DeRossi regarding fire hydrants and marking them in a way so that we know the amount of pressure coming from a hydrant. And so he is planning to go through the hydrants, and they actually mark the valve with a different colored valve. So when the fire department rolls up, they know how much pressure is in that hydrant and available to them without having to guess or look at a map. And so that kind of process is something that they're talking about in the works. So that's a bonus, but maybe we can talk to Chief DeRossi about that.
Yeah,
and then you know, in some communities they painted the whole hydrant to look like some sort of image or whatever, and an arts group do that sort of thing. I'm not sure if that's problematic or whatnot, but maybe it's free, and that's something to look at as well.
Yeah. I'd love to talk more about the, you know, the caps, coloring the caps. Yeah, they're of this horrendous mustard, whatever it is, thing. Again, that was a trend. Some communities have their trucks colored that color too, and I think it's one that should disappear. So that even with nice red hydrants, I mean, the fire chief can correct it otherwise. But I think so. It's something to consider because I think it would make our community look a little nicer.
All right.
And before anybody gets an idea about feature creatures on the hydrants, being painted on the hydrants, I think the fire chief would probably shudder at that.
He probably would. Yeah. Thanks for that. All right, we're going to move on to Development Services Heritage Advisory Commission meeting minutes. Any comments or questions regarding those minutes? Seeing none, I'll move on to Development Services Advisory Planning Commission meeting minutes for August 17th. Seeing none, I'm going to move on to that. Ms. Floyd, Ms. Rousseau, do we have any questions from the press?
No questions from the press, Your Worship.
All right, thank you. I'm going to ask for a motion to go in camera pursuant to 90.1K. A and E of the community charter. Moved by Councillor Charlotte, seconded by Councillor Brooks Hill. We will now go in camera, and we'll take a couple-minute break before we go in camera. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, staff. Appreciate your presence and all the work you're doing on our behalf.